Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Bowsette, Peach and Naruko? Part 1. Huge shout out to FANREADER26 for this story. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox, an ostracized boy in Konoha. He sat on his swing outside of the Shinobi Academy, watching all the kids playing, training, or in the case of Sasuke's fan club, swooning around the Uchiha. Same old, same old. He kicked his feet off the ground and began to swing back and forth, enjoying the wind in his face as he came down for the forward swing. He began to think about the village he lived in and what it had offered him. No one in the village likes me, they chase me, beat me, and tear me down as much as they can. The Hokage. I know he cares. But he still won't answer any of my questions about my family. What's so hard about tell me who my parents are? I mean. I know I had parents. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, but he won't even tell me their names. Why? Why won't he at least tell me who they were or anything about them? I would like to know the truth. Even if it isn't good, at least I would know. Did they hate me and abandon me? Were they killed on a mission? Did they ever really love me? He let out a heavy sigh at the last thought. Knowing would be better than worrying about what the answer would be. He had asked Hiruzen Sarutobi multiple times about his parents and why they weren't here, yet the old man would turn away and leave every time. The least Naruto wanted was to know their names. If he knew their names he would at least know they existed and hold the names in his heart. But he doesn't even have that. He doesn't even know what they looked like. Hey Naruto. Naruto looked down to see that Mizuki was calling him over. Slowing his swing until he stopped, he looked up to see the man walk closer. Something up, Mizuki-sensei? Mizuki smiled at the boy. I should ask you that. You look like you had something heavy on your mind. Wanna talk about it? Naruto thought about talking to his sensei about this, but after some thought, he chose that it was something personal and nothing he should trouble his teacher with. It's fine, Mizuki. He stood up from his swing and looked at his sensei. It's something personal so you don't need to worry about it. Mizuki. Naruto. Both males looked to see Iruka waving them inside. Recess is over. Come back inside so we can begin our lesson. Mizuki patted Naruto's back and smiled wide at the young boy. Come on Naruto. We should get inside so we can listen to Iruka droll about Konoha's history. Naruto chuckled at that as the two made their way back into the academy. After school, classroom. Naruto had to stay after class and served attention since he got into a fight with some other students. Iruka sat at his desk grading papers and making sure that the boy didn't do anything while being punished. Naruto was tempted to pull out one of his prank tools from his pocket to at least mess with his teacher, but. Don't even think about it, Naruto. Came Iruka's response without even looking up from his papers. Naruto pulled his hand away from his pocket and grumbled as he dropped his head on the desk with a loud thunk. He groaned as he turned his head to look outside the window. Is it over yet, Iruka? Iruka looked up at the clock before sighing. Naruto, it's only been 15 minutes into your hour-long detention. You shouldn't have picked a fight with the other kids if you didn't want to get in trouble. Naruto huffed as he turned his head again so his face was on the desktop to hide his anger. I didn't even do anything to them. The fight had started because a group of other students jumped him just cause they wanted to beat him up. He fought back of course, but the teachers didn't even listen to him when he tried to tell them that he didn't do anything to start it. Most of the teachers were like this. If he would be involved, they would just automatically put the blame on him, even if the proof pointed to the others. It's one of the reasons that he pranked them as much as he could. The only teachers that weren't like that were Iruka and Mizuki. Iruka looked at the boy and sighed. He knew that Naruto wasn't the type to sit in one spot for long, and if he did, someone was going to be pranked later on, and harshly. Which would just lead to the boy being punished again. Alright Naruto, I guess I can let you go this time but no more fights. Am I clear? Naruto jumped out of his seat and smiled at his sensei. You got it. He ran out the door while waving Iruka goodbye. Iruka chuckled at the boy's enthusiasm. He sure can change his attitude on a dime. He looked back down at the papers he was grading and it just so happens he came onto Naruto's test. His smile dropped when he immediately saw that the answers were way off the mark of any of the questions. He read the questions out loud as he went over the sheet. What is the tool used by shinobi to tie up a captured enemy? A kunai. What is the name of the location where the first Hokage and Madara Uchiha battled? Forest of Death. What is the name of the first, second, third, and fourth Hokage, and what were they each known for? Hiruzen Sarutobi. Iruka sighed as he shook his head. Come on, Naruto, with how much you say you want to be Hokage, and with how much you say you knew everything about them, you can't just ignore the other Hokage we've had. You didn't even put what they are known for. He began to mark them as incorrect and put the real answers for clarity. Ninja Wire. Alley of the End. Ashirama Senju, Tabarama Senju, Hiruzen Sarutobi, and Minato Namikaze. Naruto couldn't help but sigh as he marked more and more of them wrong. He remembered early on when Naruto first started the academy, the boy would put answers that were completely unrelated to what was asked. It kept happening so many times that he thought that the boy didn't care and began keeping a close eye on him when he was taking a test. It was odd cause Naruto looked like he was doing his best to answer them as he had a look of concentration and focus. Later on, the answers began to be more closely related, but they were still wrong or lacking more information. He even asked Mizuki to tell Naruto to answer the questions correctly this time before the blue-haired man nodded and went to pass out the tests. If he keeps going on like this, Naruto will never become Hokage. Meanwhile, Naruto had just run out of the classroom and down the hall to exit the building. As he made his way into an empty hallway, he slowed down until he came to a stop. Once he did, he placed his hand on the wall before he bent over in pain as his other hand went straight to his ribs. The thing about the fight he was in was that it was with a bunch of older kids that had been trained by their shinobi family. The only reason they were still in the academy, despite being older by 2 years, was because they started the academy late. Because of their training, they used kunai and chakra-enhanced punches and kicks. Not that Naruto knew they used chakra as they attacked him, since he hadn't learned that channeling chakra into one's fists enhances their power. The reason he didn't let it show was that it would possibly get him sent to the nurse's office or at worst the hospital. If he went to the nurse's office, they would glare at him, say he was lying, and just suspend him for insulting a faculty member or something. If he went to the hospital, he was in danger of the staff trying to poison him again or use a sharp medical tool and saying they have clumsy fingers. He felt that one of his ribs was broken from his beating and took a slow breath to at least make sure that it wasn't jamming into something vital. Fortunately for him, it wasn't. He carefully straightened himself and began to slowly walk out of the academy. He decided to go out of one of the side entrances that the academy wall had so he could avoid some of the people that loiter at the front entrance. He made it outside and enjoyed the fresh air before he walked along the wall and under several classroom windows. He was getting closer to the side exit when he heard someone talk. Naruto will never become Hokage. Naruto paused at hearing this and looked up to see he was just under the window of the classroom he was just in. Which could only mean one thing. It was Iruka that said it. Naruto felt his heart drop at hearing one of the people he thought would support him say something like this. The hand he had pressed against the wall to help support him dropped to the side and he just stared wide-eyed up at the window. He felt his eyes water from this, but he forced back the tears. I'm not going to cry. He would not let anyone see him cry. Living in a village of people that seemed to have some sort of twisted joy in seeing him down, he would not give them the satisfaction of knowing that something got to him. He shoved the emotion back before steeling himself to keep moving. Naruto turned away from the window and walked out of the academy ground. He slowly made his way through the streets, ignoring the sneers and harsh whispers from the people around him. His mind kept replaying the words he heard come from Iruka, but didn't really know how else to handle it as he continued on autopilot with no set destination. Hey Naruto. Naruto stopped walking when he heard the familiar voice of one of his friends. He turned around and put on his smile as he called back. Hey Tenten. Tenten was a girl that graduated 1 year ago and was considered the Kunoichi of her year. She was a girl with brown hair set up in 2 buns that had some similarities to panda ears, though he would never say that to her face. Around her forehead was her Konoha hit I-8, which had 2 short bangs of her hair coming down the top. She wore a sleeveless kipao-style blouse with red sleeve trimming with yellow fastening buttons, deep sea green pants, and standard blue shinobi sandals. He knew Tenten from his time in the orphanage as she was also an orphan like him. She had lost her mother when she was 1.5 years old due to her mother dying on a mission. Her father was not in the picture. She had met Naruto when she first arrived though he was only a baby at the time, they were the youngest in the facility and they had been friends the entire time. She had even defended him from the other kids when they tried bullying him. It was during one of the times she defended him that she learned that she liked using weapons when she used a couple of pebbles as projectiles and a stick as a sword. She had practiced using weapons from then on and gained a bit of a reputation as the weapons mistress of the academy. Tenten ran up to him with a smile. What are you doing here? I figured that you would be stuffing your face with ramen at this point. You heading to go train somewhere? Naruto chuckled as he shook his head. Nah, I don't need to train. I'm awesome already. Don't want to make everyone else feel bad. Tenten giggled at this as she elbowed him in the side. You really need to get off your high horse and get serious in your training or you'll never be able to get awesome as you say. Naruto chuckled as he rubbed his side where Tenten hit. Yeah. I need to keep getting stronger if I want to become Hokage. Tenten nodded. That's more like it. Not to mention that if you don't get any better, you'll never be able to beat me in a spar. Hey. I've won once. He grumbled as he looked away, not able to look her in the eye as he said that. Tenten laughed as she shook her head good-naturedly. No, you just got lucky that I didn't knock you out again. And that was only because I had a mission with my team. Naruto growled as he wanted to shout into the sky that he could beat her, but with him still being in pain at the moment, he couldn't. I'll show you next time. Tenten smiled at her friend's enthusiasm. We'll see about that. Anyway, I gotta go. Got another mission with my team so I'll see you around. She gave him a one-arms hug before running past him and waving back. See you later. Naruto meekly brought up his hand as he gave a soft wave. Once he saw she was out of sight, he moved to an alleyway so no one would see him falling to his knees, holding his side. Tenten's elbow wasn't that hard, but it hit hard enough to cause him to internally wince while he did his best to maintain his normal demeanor. Well, look who it is. Naruto looked behind him to see that it was the same group of kids that had beaten him up before. Aw, looks like he isn't feeling too well. Did we play too rough with you? Maybe we should play again so he gets how it's done right. Yeah, let's play. Naruto tried to get back up from his kneeling position, but he found himself being kicked back down by one of the 5 kids. Don't go. The game just started. Naruto was laying on the ground with his face in the dirt as the other kids began to play. As this happened he drowned out the world so he wouldn't have to deal with it. Later Ichiraku. AM was humming a tune to herself as she stirred a pot that was filled with ramen. She was manning the stand on her own today since her father was at home nursing a cold. Gucci got such a lecture from his daughter as she kept reprimanding him for moving some cooking supplies they had just gotten from outside during a rainstorm into the kitchen. She had told him that the pots, pans, and ladles would be fine after the rain ended and all that would really be needed would be some cleaning and drying off. She shook her head as she finished stirring and lowered the stove to a very light simmer so it would keep the ramen warm. She turned around to begin wiping down the counter when she saw her favorite customer walk in, as she would recognize that blonde hair, jumpsuit, and blue eye anywhere. Welcome back Na. It was then that she realized why she only saw the one blue eye. The other was swollen shut. Naruto. She dropped the rag she had in her hand and moved over to the boy. She knelt down and placed her hand on the side of his face and worriedly looked at the swollen eye. What happened? Naruto finally came out of his zombie-like state as he was walking on autopilot since he was beaten up again. He realized where he was and saw the worried look on AM's face. He pressed his hand on his eye and tried to joke about it. Was hoping it would be gone by the time I got here. You should see the other guys. AM ignored the attempt and got back to her feet and ran off into the kitchen. After a minute, she came back with an ice pack and gently placed it on his eye. What happened? Naruto winced at the cold sensation on his eye before he pressed his hand on the ice pack next to hers. He didn't want AM to see him in such a state, so he looked down and mumbled. Nothing. AM placed a hand on his shoulder and with her other hand gently lifted his head so he could see her. Naruto. Naruto turned his head and was becoming a little more frustrated. He didn't want to talk about himself being beaten up. He figured that he could just get some ramen and go home while his injuries heal up overnight. I said it was nothing. AM gained a stern look as she moved to be in his sight and looked Naruto in his one visible eye while trying to comfort the boy and placing her hand on his shoulder again. Naruto, please tell me what happened. Naruto just shrugged her off as he shook his head. Nothing happened. He took a step back as he thought about why he was here if all he was going to get was her butting into his business. He knew that AM wouldn't drop the subject and felt that he should just leave. I'm going home. Sorry for dropping by. He turned around with his hand still holding the ice pack to his eye. AM reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder to stop him. Naruto, please just leave me alone. Naruto flung the ice pack past AM's head and into one of the shelves that held pots and pans. The ice pack impacted, causing them all to fall off and crash onto the ground with loud clangs and bangs. Naruto was shocked that he had just thrown the ice pack at AM and made a mess of the kitchen. Looking at the mess for a second and unsure of what to do, he took a tentative step back before running out of the stand. AM was looking at the crashing pots and pans so she didn't notice Naruto leaving. Once all the noisy kitchenware was on the ground, she turned back only to see Naruto wasn't there anymore. She looked around before jolting out of the stand to see if she could spot the boy. Naruto. She sagged as she could not see the familiar features of her favorite blonde. Naruto. Naruto's apartment. Naruto made it into his apartment, locking the door behind him. His run to his house was filled with the same kind of sneering and cruel words as any other day, but as this day seemed to be kicking him when he was down, the words hurt far more than they used to. He moved to his dining table and sat in the chair before leaning his head on the table. He was internally berating himself for how he treated AM when the older girl was just trying to help him. The day may have been trying to beat him down, but he knew he shouldn't have taken it out on her. I should go back and say I'm sorry. After sitting like that for a few minutes, he got up and stumbled his way to his kitchen. He had to slowly move since his run to his house had made his ribs shift a bit in his body, and now he felt even more pain. He grabbed a watering pail and filled it with water from the sink. Once it was filled, he moved to his bedroom door before opening it to show that a spot adjacent to the window was filled with different plants and flowers. He slowly began watering the ones that required water while leaving the ones that didn't need that much alone. This was a hobby of his that he picked up some time ago when he had to help out at the Yamanaka flower shop for a couple of days. Ino had a tough time believing he had a better green thumb than she did, and it started a rivalry between them when it came to greenery. So far Ino was in the lead since she had a few more plants in her own personal garden. Though, living in a flower shop every day gave her a bit of an unfair advantage. Naruto finished watering his plants and placed the pail on the ground before he made his way to his bed. He took off his jacket and just let it drop on the ground before he lowered himself onto the bed. His swollen eye had already healed up enough for him to slowly open it, and he felt relieved at that. Well. At least my healing is still on my side. He never knew why he could heal so quickly from many of the injuries that he received, but he was grateful for it. Otherwise, he would have died from many much harsher injuries he got from others long ago. He sighed as he closed his eyes so he could get some sleep. Next day. Naruto made it to the academy early today since he wanted the school to end so he can apologize to AM. He entered the classroom to see his classmates were already there and mingling with each other. Naruto was glad that the only thing that remained from his beating yesterday was some slight scuffs he had under his clothes. Naruto. The male blonde looked to see Sakura Haruno making her way to him. He put on a smile as he waved to her. Morning, Sakura. Sakura and Naruto had become friends after Iruka had asked her if she could help Naruto study since she was the smartest in the class. During these tutoring sessions, she learned more about him and they began to talk about small things such as favorite restaurants, hotties, and the kind of shinobi they wanted to be. She did flick him on the head when he brought up how she was a fangirl for Sasuke Uchiha. She chose to forget it since Naruto was turning out to be a good friend. Interestingly, the conversation they had turned into fashion as she could not believe that Naruto would wear the orange jumpsuit that he was known for. He told her that it was the only thing that he could afford and then made a comment that she would look better with short hair. That earned him another flick on the head and called him a baka as she giggled at his random comment. Normal finger flick. Not Tsunade strength. Sakura stopped in front of him as she glared into his eyes. What did you do this time? She heard that Naruto had gotten detention, but she didn't know what it was for. She knew he could be a troublemaker, but most of the things he did wouldn't get him into that much trouble, just some warnings and possibly standing outside of the room but not detention. Naruto leaned back as he nervously chuckled. I didn't do anything this time, I swear. Sakura leaned in closer to him, which caused him to lean further. She looked into his eyes to see if she could see any lies. It was then she noticed the slight discoloration around his eye. What happened to you? Naruto wasn't sure what she meant at first till he remembered seeing in the mirror that the black eye he got was still slightly noticeable. Damn. He laughed nervously as he looked away. I just tripped and hit my eye on the corner of my chair. You gotta learn how to lie better, Naruto. Naruto looked past Sakura with a pink cat looking over her shoulder to see Ino walking up to them with a stern look on her face. You always look away when you are trying to hide something. She stopped to stand next to Sakura as both girls looked expectingly at him. Ino and Sakura had a serious rivalry for Sasuke Uchiha that nearly ended their friendship, but it was thanks to interacting with Naruto that they were able to maintain it. Though they would still fight over silly things that had to deal with Sasuke, interactions with Naruto had them separate the issue of who would be with Sasuke and their friendship. He would always bring up the idea of losing someone who they would regret not being in their lives, and both girls would admit that they cherished the other girl's company. Naruto indignantly denied this. No, I don't. Ino looked at him with a raised eyebrow and hands on her hips. Oh, really? There was no way she would believe him in this, since Naruto had a bad habit of being obvious when it came to his friends. Something Ino picked up from her dad was the skill of telling when someone lies from their body language, though she didn't need to with him. She had been able to notice that he can lie to a lot of people with a straight face, yet when it came to people he was close to, he would be as obvious as a little kid that was caught not only with his hand in the cookie jar, but with another cookie hanging out of his mouth. Naruto looked away and grumbled. Look, it doesn't matter. It's only a bit purple so it's almost gone. Before he could say anything else that would get them to drop the subject, he heard someone else enter the room behind him. Alright, everyone, take your seats. Naruto froze when he heard Iruka speak. He still felt hurt from hearing what the man said when he wasn't around and, not looking at the man, he walked towards his seat not acknowledging anyone around him. This gained the attention of Iruka, Sakura, Ino, and Hinata, as this was odd behavior from the hyperactive classmate they all knew. Normally, Naruto would bound up to his seat with a good amount of excitement, despite how he would always complain about how boring the lectures were. Hinata, being one of Naruto's friends, wanted to say something to him and find out what was wrong so she could try and make him feel better, but he sat too far away from her. She figured that she would talk to him later on, maybe during lunch. Lunch. Naruto sat at his usual swing again as he thought about the teacher he thought supported his dream to be Hokage. Guess even Iruka doesn't believe in me. That makes two people that believe I can become Hokage in this whole village now. The two he was referring to were Teuchi and Aim. Sakura and Ino had told him he could try, but not to get his hopes up about achieving it. He was okay with that since it was a very difficult goal, and Sakura and Ino didn't want him to be hurt if he doesn't make it. He knew that and was at least thankful for them still being around if he does fail. Tenten had thought it was an admirable goal to aim for and wished him luck in it, but he felt that she only thought that it was just that. A goal. Something to aim for but not fully reachable and good motivation to improve himself. Same as Ino and Sakura, but a bit more toward her believing he could. Hinata had told him that he could reach it, but she also seemed like she didn't understand why he would aim for it. She knew a leading position was difficult in itself, and the Hokage was the leader of leaders in the village. It was a role that many may strive for, but few could make it. She would also be by his side if he didn't make it, but she would cheer him on as he tried. To Naruto, it felt like they would all give him a helping hand for him to reach his goal, but they would be there more to catch him as he fell. Another stray thought entered his mind as he thought of the remaining two. But maybe Aim doesn't want to believe in me either. He believed that after yesterday's mishap, she would be mad at him and shun him like most of the people in the village. He felt that he knew her well enough to think that she wouldn't do that, but he had been disappointed before, many times, so he couldn't help the thought. Hey Naruto. Naruto looked up to see Mizuki standing over him with a smile on his face. Hey Mizuki. What's up? Was his subdued response. Mizuki smiled at the boy before gesturing for him to follow. I got something I want to show you. Come on, if we move now we can see it before lunch ends. Naruto didn't really feel like doing anything, but he figured that this might take his mind off the growing doubt he had. Hopping off the swing, he began to follow Mizuki who was walking towards the forest. Hinata came out of the academy building looking for Naruto at his usual spot so she could ask him if he was okay, but she couldn't see any sign of him. Where are you, Naruto? She went off to find the boy as fast as she could since she knew that there was something bothering him and she was going to do what she can to help. Naruto was following Mizuki, not really paying attention to where they were going. Mizuki looked back at the boy and asked. What's wrong, Naruto? You look a little down. Naruto was really getting tired of people asking him if something was wrong. Why can't everyone just leave me alone? He wanted to just tell Mizuki that it wasn't his business, but the last time he did that, he almost hit him with an ice pack. He'd heard that talking about what bothers you can help you feel better. Sighing, he decided to at least talk about some of his issues. Well, yesterday wasn't the best day for me. Naruto told Mizuki about how a few kids had ganged up on him and how the fight was a bit one-sided with the other kids having been trained before and how he didn't have anyone backing him up. After he told Mizuki about that, keeping his injuries to himself, he spoke about how, as he was leaving the academy, he heard Iruka saying that he would never be able to reach his dream. After that, I just went home. Talking about what he went through helped him feel a bit better, but he really didn't want to talk about his visit to Ichiraku's and how he almost hurt Aim. Mizuki had remained silent for the whole thing as he continued to lead the boy deeper into the forest and closer to what he wanted. Well, I'm sure Iruka has a reason for saying what he said. Naruto sighed as he just looked down to the ground. Like what? What other reason would he have to say that? Naruto waited for Mizuki to answer and try to defend Iruka, but he didn't hear anything. After a minute, he looked up to see Mizuki slow his walking down. Mizuki came to a stop and looked at the boy. Up ahead. He pointed toward something Naruto couldn't see yet. Naruto followed Mizuki's finger to what he was pointing at and was a little confused at what he saw. It looked like a green tube. He walked up and began to circle it as he looked it up and down. The tube was covered in dirt and vines which told him that it was old and had not been touched in a long time. Something else he noticed was some odd purple mushrooms that had lavender dots on the head. He had read much about plants, weeds, and mushrooms to help him in his garden, and he had never seen mushrooms like this before. Sure, there were some that were similar, but none were colored so brightly and shaped like it. In fact, there were two black spots that almost looked like angry eyes to it. He then noticed that there was one that looked different than the rest. Instead of purple with lavender dots, it was bright red with white dots, with the so-called black eyes not looking angry. Once he was closer to it, he noticed that it was much taller than him, and a jolt of curiosity got to him, making him want to know what was in it. "Hey, Mizuki, what is it?" Mizuki smiled as he moved to join the boy. "I found this a couple of days ago and thought it would be something you might find cool." Naruto hopped up and held on to the side of the pipe before pulling himself up. He noticed that the metal the pipe was made from was slippery and hard to grip on the edge, but he managed to hang on. He pulled himself up and looked into the hole that led deep into it. He hung off the side with the vines helping him stay up and spoke his new thought out loud. "It's like a pipe. A big green pipe." He tried to look deeper into the pipe, but it was so black that TT was like the light couldn't pierce the darkness, despite how the sun was shining down into it. "Do you know what's in it?" Mizuki moved behind Naruto as he spoke. "Don't know. But there is something I wanted to say about what you told me earlier." Naruto kept trying to see deeper into the pipe as he asked. "What is it?" Mizuki's smile slowly turned from a serene smile into a malicious one. "Naruko was right. You'll never be Hokage." Naruto was stunned to hear this from Mizuki, but he didn't have time to think about it as Mizuki grabbed his legs and lifted them up, causing Naruto to fall into the pipe. "As a demon like you will be dead soon." Naruto fell into the pipe and was soon surrounded by the darkness as the entrance of the pipe grew further away. Mizuki smirked at the pipe before he laughed to himself. He didn't lie when he said he found the pipe a few days ago, but what he didn't say was that he had tried to see how deep it was by tossing a few things down the entrance, and he couldn't hear any impact from the kunai or explosive tag that should have gone off on contact. This told him that the depth of it was monumental. Something else he found out was that the material the pipe was made from was not only durable enough to withstand a kunai with no marking, but it was almost impossible to stick to the surface. He had placed his foot on the side in channel chakra, but amazingly his foot slipped off like it was covered in soap. It was then he thought that he could use this to get rid of the demon brat and not look guilty. Not only that, but this pipe was deep in the forest, and Naruto hadn't even realized that they had been walking for over an hour. Mizuki didn't even care about being in that damn class with Iruka. If all goes well, in a few months, he will be out of the village with the forbidden scroll and off to join Orochimaru. He originally planned on using the demon brat to steal the scroll when he failed the graduation test, but Mizuki learned that there will be a gap in patrols, so he could use it to get in, steal the scroll, and get out. Mizuki looked down the pipe and chuckled with how far this pipe must be. He has no chance of surviving that fall. He kicked the pipe before he began to make his way back to the academy, thinking of what he would say about his absence. "I'll just say Naruto kicked me and ran off and I tried to stop him. Ha ha ha." Unbeknownst to the blue-haired man, the pipe began to shake for a few seconds before it began to lower into the ground, taking the mushrooms with it. Once the pipe disappeared into the surface, the spot the pipe was once it appeared to look like the rest of the forest floor. As if the pipe was never there. With Naruto. Naruto had been falling for a good while, and he was panicking at how far he had gone. He tossed me in. He's trying to kill me. He saw a light coming up from where he was falling out, and he shut his eyes, bracing for the pain, and hoped for a miracle that would save him from the fall. The pitch black that surrounded him turned into a bright light and seemed to be everlasting as he fell. Suddenly Naruto was thrown out of another pipe entrance that was located in a large room that was brightly lit. The room looked like it was meant for a castle treasury and was decorated with several tapestries that depicted a female with long blonde hair wearing a pink ballroom dress. Though few of them showed this princess figure, several others depicted only a crown with a pink top that had white polka dots and a pair of black eyes on the front. Since Naruto had his eyes closed, he did not control his trajectory and impacted a pedestal that had a special object on it. On the pedestal was a red cushion that held the crown that was depicted on the tapestry, but with its eyes closed. He crashed into the pedestal with his head, which caused him to wince in pain and started to lose consciousness. He sprawled onto the floor with his shoulders and head propped up by the pedestal as he tried to stay awake. "I'm going to die." He was slowly feeling his consciousness leave him as he felt something land on top of his head. He opened his eyes as much as he could, but with his vision blurring, he saw a group of figures making their way toward him, with one of them being taller and colored yellow and pink. The smaller ones made him think of that one mushroom he saw earlier. His vision began to darken until it was replaced with a bright light. So there is a light when you It was then he lost consciousness with what he believed to be the final hope that he would see his parents in the afterlife. The female figure looked down at the fallen boy after she had to cover her eyes from the bright light that came from the object that was now on him. The crown had fallen from its pedestal and landed on the boy's head. It was when the light died down that she saw the crown's eyes, which were once closed, were now open. She gasped at this before requesting those around her. "Let's take him to one of the bedchambers at once. Please send for a doctor to look him over." Pain was something that he should be used to by now with how many times he had to deal with it, but no matter how used to it you are, it will always bug you. Naruto was like that as he felt his consciousness return to him. It wasn't his body that hurt, it was his head. His body just felt normal. Ow. He felt that the spot where he had hit his head hurt as he woke up, and the fact that he felt pain told him something. I'm alive. He remembered how Mizuki had tossed him down the pipe and called him a demon as he fell. SM being nice to me was a lie too. He felt that he should be surprised about this, but after having nearly every adult hate him, he wasn't. He slowly opened his eyes, not knowing what to expect, but it sure wasn't the redecorated bed canopy. He was about to get up, but it was then that he noticed a few things. First, he was laying on an extremely comfortable bed. Like really comfortable. Like if he would die here and now he would be the most comfortable corpse that had ever found eternal rest. But being alive meant he was the most comfortable boy in the world. Second, there was a moist towel on his forehead, which meant that someone had taken care of him. He had seen that happen before in movies, but he never thought that it would happen to him. Third, he wasn't wearing his jumpsuit. In fact, the only thing he felt that he had on were his boxers, and he knew this because he felt the very comfortable blanket and mattress on his bare skin. Man, this bed is comfortable. Fourth, he wasn't alone. Sitting on the edge of the bed was a beautiful girl with long blonde hair and dazzling blue eyes that seemed to shine. And although it was clear she had a voluptuous figure, the princess dress she was wearing removed any form of sexual attractiveness, turning her into the definition of sheer elegant beauty. I can't believe I'm using the word voluptuous, and I really hope your readers get what I mean by that last statement, cause even I'm not sure I got it right. The fifth and final thing was that he was in a bedroom with a beautiful older girl with very little clothing on. His blush could have camouflaged his face into the canopy if he pressed it against it. Oh good, you are awake. Naruto slowly sat up, internally beating down his blush, and nodded. He made sure that the blanket still covered his lower half. Yeah. Oh good. Our doctor had examined you and could tell that before you arrived in the chamber, you were still recovering from many other injuries, and we were worried if your tumble could have caused you more discomfort. Naruto was stunned to hear this and immediately looked himself over to see if there was anything that would tell him if they tried anything. He turned his body to see if there was something on his back, but after he did that, he was glad to see there was nothing on him. This was the first time a doctor or medical examiner didn't try to poison him. The female was slightly confused at what he was doing, but as he turned his body around, she could not help but look at his torso. And the many scars his body had. Subconsciously, she reached out and pressed her hand on his chest, right on a long scar that ran over his left pectoral. It was faded, meaning that it was an old one. But it was still clear to see with its lighter coloring. She had seen injuries before, but they were all mostly bruising and burns that would vanish quickly. Scars like what he has were mostly seen on her friend and consistent savior, since he tends to go through some of one of the neighboring kingdom's traps, and even then, they would always vanish before they would even get back to the castle. Mostly from his star abilities. Naruto froze as he felt her hand on his chest. He looked back forward to see a saddened look on her face as she looked at where her hand was. He looked down to see that she was looking at one of the scars he got from a drunk chunin. Guy smashed his bottle against the wall before he just randomly slashed at him when he was walking home one night. He looked up to see the sad concerned look on her face. The girl pulled her hand back. I'm sorry. I was just surprised to see that you had so many scars. Naruto looked down to see the lighter skin markings he had. He had actually forgotten he had so many of them. After so long of having them, they no longer mattered to him. One thing he thought was weird was that she didn't seem to hate him or show any form of hostility towards him. Also, he knew for a fact that he hadn't seen her before in Konoha, as it would be impossible for someone like her to not be noticed in the village. He chuckled nervously as he rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, I've been through a lot. Thanks for making sure I'm okay, but who are you? She put her hand over her mouth and silently gasped as she had noticed she had yet to introduce herself. Oh, please forgive me. She got up from the bed and did a princess curtsy by lifting both sides of her skirt and bowing her upper body a bit. My name is Princess Toadstool Peach, but everyone calls me Princess Peach. Naruto went wide-eyed at hearing that he was looking at an actual princess. Now that he thought about it, it should have been obvious with how she dressed, the way she spoke, and the gold crown on her head. A princess. What do I do? Do I bow back? Get on my hands and knees? Grovel? Even as all this went through his head, he instead sputtered out I'm nice to meet you. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, but just call me Naruto. Princess Peach giggled at how flustered Naruto seemed to become. She had expected this from him since he had come out of a pipe that had, to her knowledge, never been used before. Whenever they had tried to see where it would lead, the one to go in would always come back out. This meant that the other side of the pipe was inaccessible to any of them. But without knowing where it led or any way to unblock it, it had just been labeled as out of order. Until Naruto had come out of it. Princess Peach now came to the conclusion that it was a world pipe. A pipe that led to one of many worlds that was connected to the Mushroom Kingdom, but with the way that Naruto was dressed, it could be one that only has a single connecting pipe, since not once has she seen attire like his ruined clothing. She straightened up and smiled at him. I am glad that you had woken up, Naruto, as I wished to speak to you about several things that had happened upon your arrival in my kingdom. Her eyes moved to the top of Naruto's head, as well as what had attached to your head. Naruto was confused about this and reached up to the top of his hair. So far he didn't feel anything until his hand got to the center of his head and felt something metallic. He reached with his other hand and felt the object over, but couldn't figure out what it was. He tried to pull it off, but for some reason, it wouldn't even budge. This caused him to panic as he didn't know what it was and afraid that could be harmful to him. Princess Peach moved closer and placed a gentle hand on his face and tried to calm him down. Naruto, it's alright. It is not going to hurt you. Naruto looked at her as if she was lying to his face, but the way she was looking at him and the gentle calm feeling he felt coming from her touch caused him to relax as his breathing slowed down. He felt her move her hands to gently grasp both his hands and lowered them while still looking him in the eyes. She grasped both of his hands within her own as she whispered, "You are in no danger. I promise you." Naruto calmed down at her words before numbly nodding. He licked his lips as he asked, What is it?" Peach smiled as she got up, letting go of his hands, and moved over to a vanity table. She stood next to it and gestured for him to see it for himself. Naruto was a little hesitant in seeing what it was, but his curiosity forced his feet to move him. He got up, forgetting that all he had on were his boxers, and quickly moved over to it. Princess Peach looked away as it would seem that he was more curious about what had attached to him than embarrassed at his state of dress. Naruto got to the mirror of the vanity table and could now see what was attached to his head. Safe to say, it wasn't what he was expecting. It was a crown. A gold crown that had a pink cushion top. Another thing that was confusing was that it looked like it had thin black eyes on the metallic part. Why am I wearing a crown? He looked to Peach, who looked down at him to look him in the eye as they spoke. What you are wearing is known as the Super Crown. It is one of the things I wanted to speak with you about, but I felt that it would be better if we discussed this in the audience chamber where you can learn more about it. She then gestured to a set of clothing that were folded on the vanity table. The clothing that you had on previously were extremely damaged and worn out. It was surprising to us that it had lasted as long as it had, but we felt that you might like these clothes while you are here. Your previous clothes are being cleaned as carefully as they can be, as we are unsure if you have a sentimental attachment to them. She smiled at Naruto before walking past him towards the door. I will wait for you in the hall so I can show you to the audience chamber. With that, she walked out of the room to leave Naruto to get changed. Naruto looked at the folded clothes and could not help but smile brightly at this. The reason he wore the jumpsuit was that it was the only thing that he was ever able to afford that can be considered ninja attire. He had tried to buy other outfits, but they were always priced too high. He liked the jumpsuit, but he did want to try out others. The only thing he wouldn't change was the orange, since it was his favorite color. He began to get dressed and was internally thanking the princess for her kindness. His new attire consisted of a simple black short-sleeved shirt under an orange long-sleeve hoodie jacket that had white lining and hems with a dark blue line that started from the end of the hood going down the back of the jacket. It had 2 breast pockets, one over each breast and one internal pocket on the left side. For pants, he wore a simple pair of blue jeans. Once he had the clothes on, he looked himself over in the mirror and couldn't help but think out loud, wow. These look great. He was about to head out when he saw a pair of socks and orange and white sneakers on the floor. Assuming they were for him, he put them on, internally smiling at how they used Velcro straps instead of laces. He looked back at the mirror and his eyes went to the crown on his head. He wanted to cover it up and brought his hood up and smiled as he saw that with the size of the crown and the loose fit of the hood, it was almost impossible to tell he was wearing a crown when he had his hood up. Now dressed, he left the room to see the princess patiently waiting for him. She looked him over and smiled. I am glad that they fit you. Shall we? Naruto nodded and pulled his hood down as he felt it would be disrespectful to have it up when he was with her. Besides, she already knows about it. He followed her as she led him down the hall towards what he assumed to be the audience chamber. He couldn't believe the sight of everything around him and the little people they walked past. All of the males looked the same with slight changes here and there, with the females looking much more different, but with clear similarities to the males. As he continued to walk with Princess Peach, it became more and more clear that he was in a alleged castle. It was then he realized something. He had no idea where he was. Princess Peach. He saw her turn her head and smile at him. Where am I? Peach gained a look of realization with that question and smiled as she gestured to the large window they were just passing. Welcome to the Mushroom Kingdom. Home of the Toadstool people. Naruto looked out the window and was surprised at what he was seeing. The kingdom seemed to radiate a bright, happy atmosphere with nothing but smiles. In fact, it even looked like the mountains and clouds in the distance smiled. Wow. Princess Peach could not help but find his otter kingdom cute, but they had important matters to discuss. Naruto, please join me. We can give you a tour of the kingdom when we finish. She continued to walk knowing that Naruto would follow. Naruto nodded as he took a step back while keeping his eyes on the window. He turned to the princess before running to catch up, making sure not to bump into any of the toads walking by. He followed Princess Peach until they arrived at a large set of double doors that were opened by a pair of toads that stood on the side. The doors opened to a large room with a high ceiling and a red carpet that led to a pair of thrones. There were several stained glass windows that depicted Princess Peach holding a rose with the rest of the windows being normal, letting in sunlight. All in all, it looked like how you would imagine a royal audience chamber to look like in a fantasy castle. Naruto looked ahead to see that there was another toad waiting. This one was clearly older with his big white mustache, faded white mushroom top with brown dots, instead of the normal white with red dots he had seen on most of the other toads. The elder toad noticed the two coming closer and waved his free hand as his other held onto his cane. "Ah, princess, you've arrived. And you have brought our guest. Very good. Hello Toadsworth. I believe we need to tell Naruto here about what has chosen him and what it might do." Naruto went wide-eyed as he heard her say this. "This crown is going to do something to me. Like what? Make me like the toads around here." Toadsworth could see the distress Naruto had and lifted his hand in a calming manner. "Don't worry, my boy. Nothing terrible will happen to you. Though it may be a bit unwelcome if it does happen." That last bit did not help his nerves. Toadsworth cleared his throat and began his explanation. "Ahem, well I suppose we should begin with what that crown you have on is." Naruto nodded as he placed a hand on the crown. He wanted to ask questions, but he chose to wait for the elder to finish before asking. "What you have on your head is the super crown. It is a powerful item that has been used mainly in the royal family for generations. It is given to the one next in line for the throne of the Mushroom Kingdom. And though there are many of these items out there in the world, there are specific requirements for the item to fully accept the one who wears it. There have been a few that have used the crown before, but the crown would always vanish once it has been removed from their head, which I must say was a very easy feat since the crown had not chosen them to be worthy of it." Naruto heard all this and could not hold his tongue anymore. "Wait. What do you mean next in line for the throne? And if it can be removed easily, why is this one stuck on my head? What requirements do you mean for it to fully accept the wearer?" He was panicking as he heard all this and had several thoughts running through his head. Are they going to keep me here against my will? Why can't I take it off? Do they think I'm trying to take the throne from Peach? What did I do for it to think I am worthy? Toadsworth thought it was a little humorous to see Naruto worry about what he was being told and chuckled. "It is alright, Naruto. We will show you the way back to your home when we are finished here. And you do not have to worry about taking the throne from the princess. She will remain ruler of the Mushroom Kingdom." The crown she is wearing right now was at one point a super crown, but after a time had become a simple crown. Princess Peach took off her crown to show how it was a simple accessory, highly decorative and embedded with jewels, yes, but it had no special abilities anymore. Naruto looked at the crown before looking at Toadsworth again. "So, is it just going to pop off after a while? And you said that there was something I needed to do for it to fully accept me, but I didn't do anything. I just woke up with this thing on my head." Toadsworth smiled as this was something that he was intrigued by when it happened. "Well, when you arrived here, you had stumbled into the pedestal that held the crown, and just before you passed out, it had fallen off and landed on your head. After it had landed there, it shined a bright light and finally opened the eyes that you see on the front. This means that it had found you worthy of its powers and status. It was not something that you need to do for you to be accepted by it. The crown looks into your heart to see if you are worthy. To be fully accepted by the crown, you must have a pure heart. If you possess such a heart, it will attach to you and cannot be removed by force." Naruto looked dumbfounded by what he was just told. He could not believe what came out of the older toad's mouth. He pointed at himself as he dumbly asked, "A pure heart? Me? How can this crown think I have a pure heart?" He thought about everything that had happened in his life and he just couldn't see himself as being pure. Not with all the whispers and harsh treatment he had dealt with. Demon? Monster? Abomination? Naruto shook his head to get rid of the memories of the treatment he had in Konoha and get back to the situation at hand. "I think this crown is broken. There is no way I have a pure heart." Toadsworth chuckled as he could understand why he would doubt since it was something not many believed they had. Princess Peach giggled as she moved forward and brought up her hand to gently press it over Naruto's heart. There are many different forms of purity and many different types of purity in the heart. The crown will see that even if you cannot. She lowered her hand and watched as the boy put his hand over his heart with a look of doubt. Naruto still didn't believe it, but he doubted he could convince them about it. He sighed as this was just becoming complicated in a very fantastical way. He looked back at the two and asked, "You said it would do something to me, what will it do?" Toadsworth chuckled nervously as he pulled out a handkerchief and began to wipe off the sweat he now had on his face. "Well, it will grant you a few abilities that you might find incredible. The princess also has these abilities, though she does not have much use for them since she spends more time ruling the kingdom." Princess Peach frowned when she saw that Toadsworth was trying to dodge the major change that could happen to Naruto. Sighing, she chose to be the one to tell him. "Naruto, one thing about the super crown is that. Boom. The castle rumbled as a loud explosion was heard by all inside the chamber. Toadsworth fell over as he looked around in worry. "My word. What's going on?" The double doors burst open with a few toads calling out. "Princess. Princess." Peach looked worriedly at her two subjects and asked, "What is going on?" One of the toads pointed out one of the windows and shouted out, "We're under attack by the Koopa army." Princess Peach looked out the window to see an airship flying towards her castle. She sighed tiredly at seeing this, not again. She looked to the toads and spoke with authority, "Man the cannons and return fire." The toads saluted before running off to do their tasks. Naruto looked to the princess and asked in urgency, "What's going on?" The princess moved to leave the chamber as she needed to supervise the military forces the Koopa kingdom has come to invade. "This has happened many times before, so we know how to hold them off." Naruto ran to the window to see that there were large flying black things with wide grins falling on the town below. "The people down there need help." Peach nodded as this always happened. "My forces are going to help the people escape. Please stay here. We do not wish for you to be hurt." Naruto looked at her for a second before pressing his face on the window to see if he could see more. He didn't like the idea that these happy toads were being attacked. He needed to do something. He pressed his hand on his lower back but remembered that his tools weren't on him. He looked back to the princess, who had a worried look on her face, and asked quickly, "The holsters I had on me. Where are they?" "Oh. I had wanted to ask you about those." Naruto looked at Toadsworth, who had spoken up and was moving over to the throne. "These were given to me by those who had been tasked with cleaning your clothing. There seemed to be some ninja-like objects inside." He moved behind one of the thrones and picked up the holsters Naruto was talking about. "But we had not taken them out to examine them. I wanted to ask you about them after we had finished discussing the crown, but..." Naruto ran closer to Toadsworth and took them from him. "They are my ninja tools. I use them for training and stuff." Toadsworth looked between the holsters and the boy. "Are you a ninja?" Naruto strapped his kunai holster to his leg and clipped his ninja pouch to the back of his pants. "I'm a ninja in training. And I'm going to go help the toads down there." He pulled out a kunai from his kunai holster before he grabbed a roll of ninja wire from his tool pouch and ran towards the balcony window. Peach looked startled by his declaration and reached out as if to stop him. Naruto finished wrapping the wire in the kunai hoop and looked to the princess. "They need help and I'm going to do what I can. Don't worry, I'll be fine." With that, he opened a balcony door and ran forward. He tossed the kunai in between the stone railing and jumped over it. He pulled the wire in a certain way that caused the kunai to wrap around the railing and he fell to reach the ground floor faster. Peach and Toadstool ran to the railing in a panic and looked down to see Naruto free fall before using the wire to come to a swinging stop on the ground before he ran off towards the town at high speeds. They both sighed in relief at seeing that he landed safely before Toadsworth chuckled. "People he has never met and he is off to help them. Just goes to show what kind of character he is." Peach sighed as her heart slowed to a more steady beat. She looked towards the town she knew Naruto was going to and smiled. "I see why the crown would choose him." Her smile slowly faded as she thought about what they were going to tell him. "I just hope he does not feel saddened if it happens." She turned around to go command her forces. Town square. The sky had darkened when Naruto arrived at the town. He had to help a few toads out so they could run to safety before he ran to where he heard the most commotion. As he made his way there, he looked up to see cannonballs being fired on the flying wooden boat that returned fire with its own ammunition. He remembered how the princess seemed to be used to this kind of thing, so he figured that she would be able to handle the flying boat. When he arrived at the town square, he had to pause as he saw what was attacking the town. Funny-looking turtles with both red and green shells. Some with wings that either floated or bounced. Short wizard-like beings that shot out some form of magic from a wand that turned objects into different items, and even more enemies. And then there were the wobbling brown creatures that wobbled around. Although this didn't sound so bad, it turns out that they could do a lot of damage since the turtles would launch themselves at their target and withdraw into their shells before impact. The spells the wizard was doing caused several things to explode or collapse. And the Goombas were able to capture some of the toads and began to carry them away. Shaking his head out of the shock, Naruto jumped into action. He ran to a group of the brown creatures and dropped to a slide, feet first, and used his momentum to kick them away with the toad falling on his chest. Once he stopped, he got on his feet and put the toad down. Get to safety." Watching the toad give him a grateful smile before running off, he turned to the other invading forces and glared. "I know I'm not the best fighter, but I can sure as hell cause you trouble." He ran towards one of the wizards and tried to kick him only to hit nothing but air as the wizard teleported away. He looked around to see if he could see where it went, but he had to jump out of the way of a red turtle shell. As he landed he felt a jolt of pain in his leg that sent him flying a few feet. Rolling to a stop, he looked to see what hit him only to see one of the brown creatures standing where he was. How did? Fire. Naruto looked up to see one of the large black things coming at him. He quickly rolled to the side to avoid a direct impact, but the explosion lifted him off the ground. He impacted a few crates and looked at the scorch mark on the spot the thing hit. Okay. Slow but deadly. He got to his feet before jumping away as several spells that came from a group of wizards hit the crates he landed on. He looked to see that 4 of the crates turned into some of the enemies, while the 5th one turned into a mushroom. He tilted his head and raised an eyebrow at that last one. Okay. As he dropped, he saw he was going to land on one of the green ground turtles and smirked. He landed on the turtle shell before jumping off it and towards one of the wizards. The wizard was so stunned at this that he forgot to teleport, so he was hit in the face by Naruto's fist. Naruto turned to the turtle in case it was going to attack, but was once again surprised to see the turtle was out of its shell and trying to put it back on. He didn't have time to think about it as he noticed another of the brown creatures by his leg. The creature merely bumped into his leg and it was as if he was punched by something. This time he corrected himself and slid to a stop before looking at the creature. What the? It was then he noticed something. It was very faint, almost invisible, but there was a sort of veil surrounding the creature. In fact, as he looked at all of them, they all had these veils. Is that some sort of barrier? He focused on the barrier and noticed that it encircled them everywhere except the top. That must be why when it tapped me it felt like I was punched in the gut by a boulder. But I was able to kick them away. Maybe a strong enough hit could do it, but the top is their weak point. Getting how that barrier worked, he readied himself before running into the fray again. Naruto was able to knock the brown creatures away with ease now that he knew how they worked. He did have an issue with them cause there were so many of them. The turtles were just as bad, but it was more difficult since many of them could fly and bounce randomly. The wizards were a bigger problem since he was only able to get 2 of them. They kept teleporting, firing, and then teleporting again. He had to keep an eye out for these spells, cause he didn't want to know what they could do if they hit him. And the final thing he had to look out for were the large black grinning things that fell from the sky. He had to make sure that he gained some distance just before they impacted where he stood, cause it turns out that they followed him if he moved too soon. Naruto kicked one of the brown creatures into the air before jumping, spinning, and bringing his leg up to kick it. Just before he did he felt his foot heat up and brimming with energy. He smirked as ethereal appendages sprouted out from behind him as orange energy surrounded him. He spun in the air before kicking the creature hard and sent it flying into a couple of wizards as the brown creature gained an orange aura around it just like his. He landed into a low crouch as he was surprised at what he just did. How did I? His thought was cut off as he jumped away from another of the flying black things. Above the battle. Looking down at the fight of this mysterious newcomer was a figure that sat in a floating white vehicle. The vehicle was mostly white with green highlights and a face painted on the front. The thing that kept it airborne was a propeller at the bottom of the bow-like craft. Who is that? That's clearly not Mario since he should be in Donk City with his girlfriend Pauline. Not only that this boy looked nothing like him and he fights differently. The figure then saw him perform a strike kick and her interest was increased. Focusing closer onto him, the figure saw something on his head. Something very familiar. It can't be. The vehicle then rapidly lowered towards the battle. Naruto bounced off a green turtle, getting the turtle shot out of its shell before he kicked the shell at a group of the brown creatures. Landing on his feet, he readied himself for the next enemy but was surprised to see that they all stopped attacking. All of the creatures began to back away from him which caused him to wonder what was going on. Even the large flying black creatures stopped. What are they doing? They are making sure they don't get in my way. Naruto looked up in time to see someone new jump out of a floating bowl and land a few yards away with a loud heavy impact. Bang. Cracks formed on the ground where the newcomer landed and a dust cloud covered up what they looked like. Naruto readied himself for a fight as he got into a stance. Who are you? The leader of these troops. Naruto focused on the dust cloud as it cleared and was stunned at what he saw. At first glance, he could have almost mistaken the newcomer for Princess Peach, but it was clear that she wasn't. She had hair a slightly more golden color compared to Peach's bright yellow, and it was pulled up into a high ponytail and horns on the side of her head. Her eyes were sharper than Peach's with a sense of confidence in whatever she did. She wore a black strapless princess ball gown that showed a good amount of her cleavage, which had a blue brooch in between them. The bottom portion was a short gray skirt that barely reached halfway down her thigh, and a black waist cape which seemed to also have a blue brooch in the center just below her navel. On her feet were back high-heeled boots that went up to her thigh, with spikes going around her ankles. On her arms were spiked collars that were around her upper bicep and around her wrists. The interesting thing about her was the green spiky shell she had on her lower back and the spiny lizard's tail that could be seen swishing back and forth under her skirt. This woman gave a toothy grin, showing off her sharp teeth before she spoke. "Call me Bowsette." "So. Who are you, boy?" Naruto kept his guard up as his instincts were telling him that she was dangerous. Gulping a bit he answered. "My name's Naruto. So you're the boss of all these guys?" Bowsette smirked as she nodded. "Yep." She knelt down to one of the brown creatures before petting its head. "I am the leader of all these forces. You really did a number on my Goombas and were able to dodge all my large bullet bills. Though it looked like you had some trouble with the rest of my forces. The wizard guys and Koopas can be a pain for many, but overall, you were impressive." "For a runt." Naruto grew a tick mark at that last bit. "Hey, I'm not a runt." Bowsette chuckled as she stood up. "Compared to me you are." Naruto growled at this as he brought his fists up for a fight. "Whatever. If you're the boss of these guys, then when I beat you, they should all run away." Now she laughed. "You think you can beat me? Didn't know the runt was a comedian." Naruto was really tempted now to beat her down for her continuous mocking, but he was still surrounded. Much like when the bullies got the jump on him. The bullies were able to beat him cause they attacked from all sides and he didn't see the one behind him. If it was 1-on-1, he might have been able to win, but it was 5-on-1 and they had better training. He was able to keep fighting in this fight because he kept looking around and jumping everywhere to avoid being hit. Sure, he had been blindsided a lot of times here, but he was still able to get up. One thing he didn't realize was that he was moving faster than he normally would and had become far more durable. Bowsette saw his eyes dart to all her troops that formed a circle around them and saw that he understood that he was surrounded. "Don't worry, runt. My troops will not interfere with us." Naruto looked at her in surprise as he didn't think that his thoughts were plain to see. "There is something I want to ask you, runt." Naruto's tick mark kept pulsing at being called runt. He glared at her as he asked what. Bowsette pointed at him and spoke. "That crown on your head, is it real?" Naruto had forgotten about the crown altogether and brought his hand up to touch it. Miraculously, after all the jumping, dodging, and fighting he had done, it still remained there. Looking back at Bowsette he didn't see any harm in telling her. "Yeah, it's real." He brought his guard back up in case she did anything. Bowsette went wide-eyed at his answer. "And it hasn't changed him. Why?" She clenched her fist as she huffed out a small ball of fire. "Why hasn't it changed you?" Naruto was surprised by the fire that came out of her mouth before her question registered in his mind. He tilted his head as he asked, "What do you mean?" Bowsette dropped her angered look for one of befuddlement. "Do you not know what that does to you?" She brought her hand up to her head and placed her hand on something that sat in the middle of her hair. She whispered out one last thing. "What it did to me." Naruto saw what she had placed her hand on and was shocked to see it was another super crown. Like the one he had on his own head. "What did it do to you?" Bowsette sighed as she dropped her hand. "Thought I had already accepted what it had done to me and come to like my body more. Guess I'm still a little bitter." She looked up to the boy and he doesn't even know. "Why did you put that crown on in the first place?" Naruto crossed his arms in a huff as he looked away. "I didn't put it on. It fell on my head by accident." Bowsette was surprised by this and he didn't even put it on. She then thought about what she saw in front of her. And yet he hasn't changed. Lucky kid. "Well, runt, you said that you would beat me, right? Well, let's see what you can do." She crossed her arms under her ample chest and stood nonchalantly as if he wasn't a threat. Naruto growled as he saw how she was acting. "Don't underestimate me." He readied himself to beat her into the ground with everything he had. Bowsette smirked. "Feisty. If you beat me I might even call you by your name, but if you want a victory against me, runt, you're gonna have to work for it. Show me what you've got." Naruto vs Bowsette. I played I Stand Alone by Genderbending feat. Zaid Wolf. But you can choose your own battle music. Naruto stood in his spot as he looked at Bowsette who just stood there. None of the troops moved as they all stood there watching the two. The only thing that could be heard was the wind as it blew some dirt into the sky. Naruto felt a bead of sweat slide down the side of his face as his muscles tensed. The few toads had returned to see the standoff with the invader and this newcomer. One set of blue eyes filled with determination looked into the blue eyes of amusement. Bowsette was still smirking at him and waited for him to make the first move. Her lips twitched into a wider grin. Now. Naruto charged at her at full speed, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. He jumped and sent a kick to the side of her head. Bowsette blocked it with her hand and smiled at the start of the fight. While still in the air, he spun his body to send another kick to the other side of her head, which was blocked by her other wrist. She threw a punch aimed at his face, but he leaned his head back and the fist barely flew past his chin. Landing on his hands. He brought his legs in and sent a double mule kick at her chest. She blocked it with an X-arm guard, but the force of the kick sent her airborne. Naruto got to his feet before he leapt after her. Not bad, runt. She waited for him to get closer before she sent a 3-hit combo to his head, stomach, and chest. Naruto blocked the ones to his head and stomach but was too slow to block the one to the chest. Fighting through the pain, he grabbed her arm with both hands. He looked into her eyes and smirked at her surprised expression before spinning in the air and sending her back down. She crashed into the ground, getting everyone nearby to run off to give the fighter more room. She got up from the ground and swung her tail to send the dust cloud away. She saw him coming down on her like a meteor and brought her arms up to block his kick. The ground cracked beneath her feet from the force. She gritted her teeth from the force before she thrusted her arms to the side, pushing him off and spinning to hit him with her tail. Naruto leaned his head back to dodge the tail and somersaulted away. Once he stopped a good distance away, he tensed his muscles and charged at her. Once again he was surrounded by an orange aura with it condensing and focusing into the fist he pulled back. Bowsette saw that he was charging up another strike attack and smiled. Naruto closed in and pulled his fist back even more. Take this. And he threw the punch at her face. Then music. Dust and debris were sent everywhere with all who were watching hanging on as best they could to something to not be blown away by the shockwave. Naruto was breathing heavily as he landed on the ground with his fist still extended. Pretty good, runt. Naruto's eyes went wide as the dust cleared to show that she had caught his punch and didn't even have a slight hint of being tired. Bowsette smirked devilishly as she lifted the fist she had caught and brought him face to face with her with their noses touching. But not good enough. Faster than he could see, her fist embedded into his stomach. Erg. She spun and hit his head with her tail, which sent him flying. In a burst of speed, she ran after him and as he was still soaring, she grabbed his head and smashed him into the ground, creating a massive crater with his head buried in the dirt. She picked him up and had an evil smile as she saw that he was still conscious. Tough, aren't ya? Naruto coughed up a bit of blood as he glared at her. He slowly lifted his fist. Felt worse. He threw the punch, but it had no energy in it, so it merely tapped her forehead. Bowsette's evil smile turned into a serene, gentle one. She used her free hand to catch his fist as it dropped from her forehead. She lowered herself into a sitting position with her knees tucked and moved Naruto so that his head would lay on her lap. The hand that had been gripping his head moved to gently rub his face with the other, now gently holding his. You are a fighter. Don't ever lose that, runt. Naruto looked up at her as he mumbled out. I'll get you to say my name. One day. With that, he lost consciousness and began to sleep on her lap. Bowsette smiled down at him as she rubbed his cheek. I look forward to it. Runt. You went too far, Bowsette. Bowsette smirked as she heard this. Oh please. He handled it well enough. She looked up to speak with the arrival. Wouldn't you say, Princess? Princess Peach was standing at the edge of the crater as she looked down at Bowsette. She did a little hop into the air before she floated down to stand in front of the two. He was already recovering from injuries he had already sustained. He was not at full strength. Bowsette laughed at this as she looked down at the unconscious boy. He seemed to have plenty of strength to fight my forces. Peach huffed as she lowered herself to press her hand on the cheek. Bowsette wasn't rubbing, but he shouldn't have to concern himself with our war. Bowsette scoffed at this. War, she calls it. At this point, this is our usual thing. This is more of a game now than anything else. We go through the same routine. I kidnap you, Mario comes, we battle, he rescues you, takes you home, and we wait for the next time to do it again. No one really gets hurt, a bruise here and there but nothing major. Peach huffed at her as she gave her a cute glare. And yet every time you do this, my kingdom must go through repairs from all the buildings your forces destroy. Bowsette shrugged. We pay for half the damages and my Goombas help in repairs. Peach stood up with her hands on her hips as she gave a stern look to Bowsette. This became a game as you call it when you corrupted that. She pointed at the super crown on top of Bowsette's head. Hey. How was I supposed to know that this would happen? She pointed at her chest before she continued. If I knew, I never would have put it on. She grimaced as she remembered the day she did. The pain. She shook her head from those thoughts as she looked back down at the boy. You didn't tell him yet. Peach sorrowfully sighed. No, we were just about to inform him just before you attacked. He does not know the effects yet. Bowsette looked down at the boy and nodded. Tell him the benefits but leave out the consequence. Peach was about to protest this but was stopped by Bowsette continuing. Look at him, Peach. Not me, him. It hasn't happened and with how long it has been, it won't happen. But what if it does? Bowsette sighed as she looked at Peach and then back to the boy. She ran her finger on his whiskered cheek and smiled sadly. Then tell him we will help him through it. Peach frowned at this and was against it, but Bowsette was right. It had been over 24 hours since he had the crown on him and nothing had happened yet apart from the benefits. Alright, but no, I do this under protest. Bowsette rolled her eyes. Whatever you say, princess. Peach giggled as she watched Bowsette stand up with Naruto in her arms in a bridal carry. Don't forget that you are a princess as well. I keep reminding us, why don't ya? She looked at the blonde boy in her arms and smiled. Thanks for the fun, runt. She leaned down and pressed her lips on his cheek. She then handed him over to Peach and nodded to her. She turned around, took a few steps, and leaped into the air, landing in her Koopa clown car, surprised it's called that. She then looked to her troops. Koopa Troopa. The battle is over. We're going home. Return to the airship and set course to the Koopa Kingdom. She took one last look at the two below her and smirked before flying off to the airship. Peach watched as the Koopa troop began to leave her kingdom and sighed as she looked around to see the damage. She looked down at Naruto as he slept in her arms before smiling. She leaped out of the crater to see Toadsworth waiting for her. Toadsworth looked around at the town before looking up at her. Quite the mess they made. Yes. It is. She then began to make their way back to the castle to begin the repair detail for the town. Toadsworth rubbed his mustache as he watched her leave with Naruto. Choosing to save his thoughts for another time, he looked to the toads that were returning. Well, everyone. Shall we begin repairs at once? Okay. Toadsworth nodded as he pulled out a yellow foreman hard hat from somewhere and began to supervise the repairs the toads were going to do. Knock knock knock. Naruto. Are you home? Come out of there. It's been 4 days since you've been in class and you can't keep skipping it. Naruto was tapping his foot in front of Naruto's apartment door. Skipping class wasn't something that was new when it came to the blonde, but it had been 4 days since Naruto was last seen, and Naruto knew that skipping for 4 days would hinder Naruto's chances of graduating more and more. After another minute, Naruto sighed as he shook his head. Naruto, if you aren't going to speak to me, then just know that you need to show up in class if you want any chance at graduating. He began to walk away as he thought about the boy. Normally when Naruto skipped class, he could catch the boy fairly easily. He would just anticipate where Naruto would most likely go and cut him off. The thing that was bugging him was the fact that Naruto hadn't pulled any pranks recently. When Naruto skipped class, he would usually pull a village-wide prank and run away from the Chunin, Jonin, and even the Anbu. But it's been quiet. He then thought about the last time he had seen the blonde, and it was just before Mizuki came back saying that Naruto had attacked him before running away. This was odd as it wasn't in Naruto's nature to attack someone for no reason. Even when someone would badmouth him, Naruto would just wave it off. Naruto chose to head to the one place he knew Naruto would pop up no matter what. Ichiraku Ramen. Ichiraku Ramen. Naruto was closing in on the stand and he caught a glimpse of blonde hair. Knowing only one blonde that goes to the stand, he smiled and made his way to it. He moved the flap as he called out, Naruto, where have? Dottie paused as he saw that it wasn't Naruto, but Ino. Ino. I didn't know you ate here. Ino brought up the noodles that were already being eaten by her and swallowed before she glared at the older man. She pointed her chopsticks at him as she grumpily said, blame Naruto for this. He forced me to eat ramen before and I hate him for it. Naruto tilted his head as she saw her take another bite. If you hate him for that, why are you eating it? Ino swallowed another bite before she grumpily grumbled out. Because it's delicious. Stupid Naruto, ruining my diet. She took another bite out of her ramen. Naruto then saw that Ino wasn't the only one there. Sakura. Hinata. I suppose Naruto got you hooked on ramen as well. Sakura had finished her bowl already, so she was just drinking tea now. She shook her head as she answered, not really, it's good for lunch, but I came here looking for Naruto, like Ino. Hinata actually likes ramen a lot, so I guess she could have come here for it, but turns out that she was looking for Naruto too. Naruto was confused about all three looking for Naruto and asked, why were you looking for him? Ino finished her bowl and placed it on the counter. I was looking for him to rub it in his face that he lost this week in our competition since I got 3 new flowers to add to my garden. Sakura shook her head, always trying to one-up each other in your little contest. Naruto couldn't help but give a dry chuckle as he thought about that statement. Like you two when you are after Sasuke. At least Naruto and Ino's contests are less violent. He sighed before looking towards Hinata, who had several bowls stacked next to her. He sweat-dropped as he had another thought. She could give Naruto a run for his money. He looked back towards Sakura and asked, why were you looking for him, Sakura? Sakura folded her arms as she spun in her seat so she could lean her back against the counter. We have a test coming up and I know for a fact that Naruto won't get through it if he doesn't study, so I was looking for him to help him out. Naruto then gained a look that said he had something he wanted to ask. Thinking about the best way to word it, he looked towards Sakura. Speaking of which, you helped him out for the last test. Did you make sure he could remember all that he learned? Sakura smirked at this as she remembered the last study session. With all the studying we did and how he could recite the chapters about the Hokage by heart, I know for a fact that he passed. This surprised Iruka as he remembered that Naruto had failed the test. But with what Sakura had said, he should have had no trouble with it since most of the test had to deal with the 4 Hokage and their achievements with some basic ninja-related questions thrown in. Then why did he not answer them all correctly? Something wasn't right about this and he felt the need to look into it, but at the moment he needed to find the boy. He looked at the last girl and asked, "What about you, Hinata? Why were you looking for him?" Hinata sighed sadly as she remembered the last time she saw him. When Naruto came into class a few days ago, I could tell that something was bothering with him. He may be able to hide it from most people, but I could tell that something was wrong. Ino perked up at this as she looked to the Hyuga. Now that you mention it, I noticed the same thing. The smile he gave looked like the one he usually has, but it kinda felt off. Sakura nodded as she also had the same thought about the blonde boy. Maybe it has to do with the light bruising he had on his eye. Iruka was a little stunned to hear that Naruto had some bruising on his eye. He chose to file that little bit of info for later before he sighed as he just found out that something was bothering Naruto and he didn't even notice. "Welcome, Iruka." Iruka looked up towards AM and noticed that she was looking around for something. Or rather someone. "Something wrong, AM?" AM sighed sadly as she didn't see her favorite blonde. "I was hoping that Naruto would be with you. I wanted to talk to him since the last time he was here, he was hurt. Both physically and emotionally." Iruka was now worried. "When was the last time you saw him?" AM sighed sadly before she spoke, "About 4 or 5 days ago." Iruka thought about what had happened during that time and remembered when Mizuki had told him that Naruto attacked him before running away. 4 days and no one has seen him. Not even AM. So no one has seen him in days. He saw that all the females shook their heads. Oh no. He bowed to AM, giving his goodbye before he left. He began taking a brisk pace towards the Hokage mansion. The only person that sees Naruto the most, besides AM, would be the Hokage, and that is mostly because the elderly man kept an eye on Naruto a lot. If AM hasn't seen him, then he might be in trouble. Naruto. Our favorite male blonde slowly opened his eyes as he regained consciousness. What happened to me? He tried to remember what happened before he lost consciousness until he remembered his fight with Bowsette and how she had mopped the floor with him. His eyes shot open to the sight of a familiar canopy. He heard something sparkle and turned his head to see the princess sitting at his bedside with her eyes closed and clasping her hands as if she was in prayer. There was a sparkling glow around her that seemed to spread from her own body to his. It was then that he felt a serene warmth surround him and he slowly sat up. "Princess Peach." Peach heard the voice and opened her eyes to the sight of Naruto sitting up in his bed. "Naruto. Thank goodness you are awake. After your battle with Bowsette, you had fallen unconscious and I grew worried when you had not regained consciousness after a day." Naruto felt some dread at her statement as the way she said it made it seem like he was asleep for more than a day. "Wait, how long was I out?" Peach placed her hands on her lap as she told him. "You had been asleep for almost 3 days. I had spent most of my time using my magic to heal you as I was worried you might not wake up." Naruto went wide-eyed at being told that he had been asleep for 3 days. Not once had he been out that long. None of his previous beatings were enough for him to be unconscious that long. All he ever needed was a good night's sleep and most of his injuries would be healed. He wanted to freak out, but instead, he chose to get up and bow to the princess. He had been showing more respect to her as she was an actual princess and he had seen enough princess movies to know that he should always treat them as such. He didn't show this much to the Hokage because it felt weird to even think about it. "Thank you for everything you did for me, Princess Peach." Peach smiled as she got up from her seat and walked over to the boy. Once she was in front of the still bound boy, she brought her hand up and cupped his cheek before she gently lifted his head so he could see her. "Please just call me Peach, Naruto." She may have only just met the boy, but she had become very fond of him. Her fondness for him had actually grown during the time she had been healing him, as with her magic, she could feel that there was a sadness in him that he had hidden well. As she used her magic, she did not just try to heal his wounds, she had also tried to soothe the sadness he had. She felt it was wrong for such a kind-hearted boy such as him to have sadness that had made her cry when she felt it. He should always be smiling. Naruto blushed as she cupped his cheek, but he didn't try to hide it as he smiled up at her. "Thank you, Peach." He stood up straight as she let his cheek go. He was about to say something when a knock was heard at the door. Peach looked at the door and asked, "Who is it?" "It's me, Mario." Peach smiled as she moved over to the door and opened it to show her longtime friend and savior Mario. "Mario. Welcome back, Mario. How was your time in New Donk City?" "It was good. I heard that Bowsette had attacked again, but you had not been kidnapped his time." Peach nodded as she moved to the side for Mario to come into the room and gestured to Naruto who was standing by the bed. "It was thanks to Naruto here that Bowsette had not taken me this time. He had entertained her enough that she had chosen to leave after the battle. Mario looked at the boy and nodded. He walked up to the boy before bringing a hand up for a handshake. Naruto looked at the hand for a second before bringing his own hand up to shake it. "Thank you for helping the princess and entertaining Bowsette while I was away." Naruto was confused at several bits of dialogue that went between the two. The way they had talked about the attack, it was like it was nothing major. Like it could happen and they would just say it was a typical Friday night. You're welcome." Mario smiled at the boy before his eyes noticed the crown on top of his head. This caused him to freeze at the sight as he recognized what it was. His eyes kept shifting from the crown to the boy's face, and his eyes were not deceiving him. Naruto noticed his shifting eyes and let go of the frozen man's hand. "Yeah, it's the super crown. It fell on my head and I can't get it off." He began to tug on it as if trying to remove it, but it just remained in its spot. Mario looked back to the princess with wide eyes and with the unspoken but clear question. "Is that really?" Peach nodded as she moved over to stand behind Naruto. She placed her hands on his shoulder as she spoke. Naruto here had found his way to our world through a world pipe and had accidentally gotten the crown on his head. Much to our surprise, it had chosen him to be its wearer. Mario still had one burning question on his mind, but he saw the princess make a small gesture telling him that they can discuss it later. Naruto tilted his head upward to see the smiling face of Peach before he remembered a question he wanted to ask. "How are the people in town? Are they okay?" Peach smiled at Naruto before nodding. "Yes, they are alright. If you'd like, we can go visit the town." Naruto nodded as he wanted to see if the toads in town were okay. Peach then walked to the door, gesturing for the men to follow her. Later. It had taken a while for the horse carriage they were riding to get to the town. Naruto thought it was odd since it didn't seem that far away with how fast he had gotten there during the battle, but he figured it was because he was more worried about helping the toads than he worried about the distance. He was glad when the carriage stopped and they got out. He was expecting to see the town in shambles and still in pieces, but instead, the town looked like it was brand new. Like there wasn't an attack just a few days ago. Wow. But how? Peach giggled at his dumbfounded look before answering. "We have had to rebuild so much that we are able to completely restore the town relatively quickly." Naruto still thought it was odd how fast the repairs went, but since he didn't know anything about how to rebuild a town he shrugged his shoulders and just accepted the answer. But that did bring up something he wanted to know. "You said that your people are used to it, and with the way you and Mario spoke, it was like the attack was a game, why?" Peach sighed as she began to walk into town, with Naruto and Mario following her. Bowsette was once a tyrant with intentions of ruling the whole Mushroom Kingdom. At that time, the attacks were far more dangerous, and we were always trying to defend as best we could. However, after a certain incident, she had begun to mellow out her attacks and would never intentionally harm anyone. That is why most of her forces were slow and only captured toads to set them aside. She had told us that she does it now because it is a form of entertainment for when she has nothing else to do. Now the most grievous injuries that we have to deal with are bruises, cuts, and a few burns, and with the magic we have, those can be healed quite quickly. Naruto could not believe what he was just told. He stopped his walking as his two companions moved further ahead of him. So. That attack a few days ago was. Both Peach and Mario turned to smile at the blonde boy with Peach saying a typical Wednesday afternoon. Naruto's face faltered at such an answer. That was just a typical Wednesday. He shook his head as he felt that since this was in Konoha, things must be different for them. He began to follow the two as he looked around at the repaired town. As he walked through the streets behind Peach and Mario, he finally got a look at the town. Compared to how it was during the attack, the sky was a bright blue with white clouds. The grass in the distant mountains looked so full of life with how vibrant the green color they had. And instead of the Goombas, Koopas, and Bullet Bills, he saw smiling faces of toads in different colors. The townspeople saw the princess walking with the celebrity hero Mario, but it was when they saw the new person with them that they all smiled and began to wave to him. Naruto saw all of the toads begin to wave at him, and he began to shrink in on himself, since he wasn't used to such treatment. He brought up his hood in an attempt to hide his face, and raised his hand to give a small nervous wave to everyone. Peach turned her head and saw how he was trying to hide himself from everyone's view. She spun around and stopped walking as she waited till he was right in front of her. She smiled at him as he looked up at her. She brought up her hands and slowly lowered his hood before using her fingers to cup his chin and bring his face up. "No need to hide here, Naruto. They are all grateful for what you did for them. You had never met anyone in my kingdom before, you are in a different world entirely, and yet you jumped into battle to save them. You do not need to be ashamed of doing that. Instead, hold your head up high and be proud of what you did." She then cupped his cheek and ran her thumb over his whiskers. "I am also grateful to you for what you did for my people. That was a very brave thing you did." Naruto looked her in the eye before his eyes shifted to Mario, who stood just behind Peach, and saw the man nod his head. He looked back at the princess before mumbling out, "Thank you and you're welcome." Peach nodded with a bright smile before she took a step back and clasped her hands on her lap. She then turned around and began to walk again. "Come Naruto, I wish to show you around Toad Town." Naruto could not help but find the place amazing. Sure, Konoha had this air of a peaceful village, but the town that stood outside of the castle gave off the feeling of happiness. Some things he noticed were that despite how he originally thought that there were only toads in the town, it turned out there were other inhabitants. Namely some Goombas and Koopas. But with how they were acting with the toads, he figured that they just lived here without causing any trouble. As he was looking around, he noticed a plant that was on the window shelf. It was an odd plant as it had a red bulbous bud with white polka dots and a green vine that ran over the top. He leaned in closer as it was an interesting plant. "Maybe I can take one of these with me to show Ino." "Careful." Naruto was suddenly pulled back as a flash of teeth chomped at his face. He looked back to see Mario had pulled him away from what he could now see as a man-eating plant. Mario sighed in relief before he chuckled. "They are called a piranha plant. They are much bigger than these and can be a real problem, but when they are this size they chomp." The two males looked to see the plant chomp at a fly before chewing and eating it. "They are good for that." Naruto nodded as he mentally told himself. Better not get one to show Ino. After exploring the town, they had stopped in the town square and sat on the fountain edge. Mario had left the two so he can get something for the three of them to eat. As the two sat at the fountain, Naruto saw several different locations in the distance. "Hey Peach." Peach looked at him with a tilt of her head, prompting Naruto to continue. Naruto pointed to a certain area that could be seen that looked like it was a snowy mountain, but he could see there were several bright buildings on it. Which was amazing since from what he could tell the mountain was very far away. "What's on top of that mountain?" Peach followed his finger and saw what he was pointing at. She smiled as she began to answer him. "That is the snowscapes. What you see at the top are lodges that are used for when someone wants to go skiing or just to enjoy the snow." She then thought about the many different locations that are within the Mushroom Kingdom. "There are many different types of locations within my kingdom, Naruto. Maybe I can show you what it has to offer you sometimes." Naruto smiled at Peach before nodding. "I'd like that." Before anything else could be said, someone began shouting. "Mario! Mario! Mario!" Naruto looked towards who was calling out to Mario to see someone that looked a lot like him. The difference was that he was taller, skinnier, and was wearing green instead of Mario's red. The thing that caught most of Naruto's attention wasn't the man though, it was the green lizard thing that was walking next to him. Not only that, but the lizard thing seemed to have something on its back. Peach saw the duo and called out to them. "Luigi. Yoshi. Over here." Luigi and Yoshi turned their heads to see Princess Peach calling them over. They both walked over to her and saw that she wasn't alone. Peach stood up to greet them before turning to the still sitting blonde boy. "Naruto, this is Luigi and Yoshi." She gestured to the two respectively. Luigi is Mario's younger brother, while Yoshi is Mario's travel companion on many of his adventures. She then looked to the two. "This is Naruto. He was the one to defend Toad Town when Bowsette had last attacked." Luigi shivered in fear as he remembered the attack. He was on the outskirts of town when it happened, and he did his best to deal with several of the invading forces, but he didn't get to the main battle before the troops all left. Yoshi nodded as he had heard of the attack and came as fast as he could to see if he could help Mario repel the Koopa army. But when he arrived, the battle was over. He came rushing not only to help Mario, but to make sure that the daycare center that several baby Yoshi were staying at was okay. Thankfully, no damage was done to the building. Something he was grateful for was that Bowsette's forces tended not to damage buildings like daycares, schools, or anything that could house children. He was surprised to hear that it wasn't Mario that fought Bowsette this time, but a newcomer to the Mushroom Kingdom. "Thank you for helping the town." Naruto was surprised to hear Yoshi speak since he was not expecting it to do that. You're welcome." He then saw a bunch of baby Yoshis of different colors pop out from behind Yoshi's head and all stared at him. "Wow. I didn't know you had kids." Before he could say anything else, the baby Yoshis all opened their mouths and shot out their tongues at him, sticking to several spots on his face. "Ah." He shut his eyes as several of the tongues were now stuck to his eyelids as he almost lost balance at the sudden push to his face. Peach covered her mouth as she thought it was amusing to see Naruto get this kind of attention. "That means they like you." Yoshi was surprised to see all the babies on his back were all indicating liking someone they had not met before. Yoshis in general were very good judges of character. For the babies to do this must mean that Naruto was a very kind person and someone they could trust wholeheartedly. Since the babies all seemed to like him and how he had protected the town, he gained an idea on how to repay the boy. And it just so happens he could do it right now. Naruto felt relief when all the tongues were pulled back, but he had to wipe off some of the saliva that their tongues left behind. He wiped his face with his hands and got the spit out of his eyes before he opened them to see something was put in front of him. Peach was a little stunned at what she was looking at, while Luigi looked on in intrigue. Naruto looked at the thing in his face to see that it was an egg. A very large egg with different colored dots all over its white shell. He looked to Yashi as he was the one holding it out to him. Yashi smiled as he spoke. This is a thank you for helping the town while we were away. The babies all like you, so that means that you are a good person. As thanks for what you did, I am giving you one of my eggs. Naruto was stunned at the fact that he was being given an egg and he didn't know what to do. He looked to Peach as if asking what he should do. Peach smiled at him as she said to be given a Yashi egg is a great honor. It means that the Yashi tribe sees you as someone that they can rely on and will always help them when they are in need. This is also a sign of everlasting friendship between you and the Yashis. Naruto looked back at the egg before slowly taking it. He held it in his arms before looking at the smiling face of Yashi. Thank you. Yashi nodded as he accepted the thanks and saw the boy hold onto the egg gently. Yashi. Luigi. Everyone saw Mario approaching them with a basket full of food. Mario made it to them as he greeted his brother and best friend. Good to see you too. He then turned to the blondes of the group and pulled out some sandwiches for them to eat. Once he saw the two take them, he looked to his brother and friend. Would you like to join us? Luigi thought about it for a second before nodding, prompting Yashi to do the same. The group sat at the fountain as the residents of the Mushroom Kingdom asked about Naruto and what he liked to do. Naruto told them about himself while keeping his treatment in the village a secret as he didn't want to bother them with his problems. After he told them a bit about himself, he asked about the Mario brothers, which began the tales of their adventures. Meanwhile in Konoha, Naruto stood in front of the Hokage as he had told the leader of the village that Naruto had not been seen in 4 days, not even by Aim. Hiruzen grew worried at hearing this as it was not like Naruto to just up and disappear without at least the ramen chef seeing him. And you're sure they haven't seen him? Naruto nodded as he was now extremely worried for the young blonde. Not even the Hokage has seen him. Where are you, Naruto? Hiruzen's mind was going a mile a minute as he thought about where the boy could be. His mind went through multiple negative scenarios and began to internally panic. He snapped his fingers and a group of Anbu appeared in front of Haruka in a kneeling position. Sir. Hiruzen looked to the Anbu in front of him and spoke with authority. I want you to begin a search for the young Naruto Uzumaki. I want him brought back safely and for any who may have harmed him to be dealt with. Also, I want 2 of you to tail Mizuki and report to me. But if there are any signs that he is responsible for Naruto's disappearance, he's to be brought to me on his knees. Sir. They all said before going to do as ordered. Naruto was shocked to hear that they were going to spy on his friend and made his thoughts known. Sir. Why spy on Mizuki? Hiruzen looked to Haruka and knew that since the blue-haired man was Haruka's friend, he would not like the idea, but he needed to cover all bases. I understand your concerns, Haruka, but Mizuki was the last one to have seen Naruto that we know of. Therefore he is not above suspicion. Haruka just couldn't believe that Mizuki would have something to do with Naruto's disappearance since he had seen the two act friendly with each other while at school. But sir. We are shinobi, Haruka. Deception is something we all know how to do and the village's hatred for Naruto is deep. It is not out of the question that Mizuki may hold some form of hatred towards Naruto and is not showing it outright. Haruka still held on to the idea that Mizuki had nothing to do with why Naruto was gone. But as he thought about the two, there was something that began to bug him. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he trusted his feeling that there might be something there. It was then that he remembered what Sakura said about Naruto being knowledgeable about the previous and current Hokage. He gained a stern look as he bowed to the Hokage and dismissed himself as there was something he wanted to look into. Mushroom Kingdom. Naruto had enjoyed all the time he had spent with everyone here and could say that it was the best day of his life. But he then felt that it was time to leave. Guys. I love being here and meeting all of the people in the kingdom, but I think it's time for me to go home. He didn't like the sad look he saw on all of their faces and for some reason, it felt off to say that last bit. Peach had come to really enjoy Naruto's company, but she knew that he had a home to go to and he had stayed for far too long. Yes, you have stayed here for many days and I'm sure that your parents should be worried about you. Naruto kept up his poker face, but it was hard since it stung when he heard her say that. Yeah. With that, the group all went their own ways with the Mario brothers heading to their home, Yashi going back to Yashi Island, leaving Peach and Naruto to head back to the castle. Naruto stood in the very room he had arrived in as he looked at the green pipe that he was told would send him back. He looked behind him at both Toadsworth and Peach as they were here to see him off, so I guess this is it. His grip tightened on the bag that was holding his old jumpsuit and he held the egg to his chest tighter as he felt like this was goodbye. Toadsworth twirled his mustache as he nodded. Yes it is, dear boy. Peach could see the sad look Naruto had and moved closer to him. She looked down at him before smiling. "This isn't goodbye, Naruto. You can always come back whenever you wish." Naruto fully turned to look up at Peach with a look of surprise. "Wait, really? I can?" Peach nodded before she brought her hand up to the crown on his head. "This crown grants you the ability to summon a pipe much like this one for you to return here if you wish. All you have to do is wish for it and the pipe will appear in front of you no matter where you are." Naruto's fear of not being able to come back had immediately vanished as he was told that the thing that accidentally fell on his head would allow him to come visit whenever he wanted. Peach smiled as she saw the sadness and fear vanish immediately. "We will see you again, Naruto." Naruto nodded as he walked towards the pipe, ready to jump in. "Oh, one last thing." Naruto turned around and was about to ask what Peach wanted to say, but stopped when he felt a pair of soft lips on his cheek. "See you again, Naruto." Naruto was dumbfounded as he couldn't comprehend that the princess had just kissed his cheek. After a few seconds of standing there, he shook his head before smiling at the two. "I'll see you guys later." And with that, he leaped backward and down the pipe. Peach and Toadsworth watched the boy leave before they began to make their way out of the room. Toadsworth chuckled at the whole scene, but again kept these thoughts to himself. Konoha. The pipe sprung up from the ground in the middle of the forest before Naruto was seen jumping out of it and landing on his feet. The trip was faster than the last time he remembered, but he chose not to dwell on it much. He turned around when he heard the pipe go back into the ground and disappear as if it was never there. He shrugged his shoulders before looking at the egg in his arms and smiled at it. Wonder when it will hatch and what color Yashi will come out of this. He felt giddy and this thought before he began making his way out of the forest and towards his apartment. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.